Almost everybody's.
Yeah. Okay, well, now that we're officially started, welcome. So I know we're missing Oliver, and he unfortunately couldn't make it at the last second. He had to travel for work. But I think we all know why we're kind of meeting like this over the last few months. We've all kind of talked about this, whether it's at the beginning of the meetings or at the end or over email or over phone or just talking in the halls. A lot of you guys have mentioned just different things that keep coming up, like different challenges, procedural things. So I think the best way we can kind of sit down and talk about this is to do just that and have a really informal chat without having to sit in front of applicants or have it at the end of a meeting when we're all tired and it's like 7:30 p.m. So today is just really about kind of at least getting to know ourselves a little bit better, because I think a lot of us don't quite know everyone's like educational background and their expertise and kind of what they bring as their own personal interest to the Concom. So maybe we'll do a little roundtable like that really quick, even though we're all really familiar with ourselves. But then we'll kind of list out all the topics that at least Peter, Barbara, Jess, and I have been talking about. And I think a couple of you chimed in with different topics too. And then just kind of start talking about like what things we want to fix, what we see as potential issues, what we think we're doing good, talk about goals, and just kind of get everybody on the same page going forward through the summer and the rest of the year of kind of like how we want to really target our meetings even better. Because I think we are doing a great job so far. And I think a lot of people have commended us for our work. So I think it's important that we just keep the momentum going. And the best way to do that is to keep tabs and touch base every now and again. So I think I'll just start by saying I'm on this commission because I have to be, because it's my job, but also because I love the work that you guys all do. And I'm super passionate about flooding and wetlands and climate adaptation and things like that. So all the applicants that come before us really interest me personally in the sense of how they can protect themselves from future like flood adaptation things and climate change and storm surges and things like that. So that's really where my interest comes in, along with obviously like keeping this commission as strong as possible and making sure we're doing an awesome job and just really being there for residents and community members when they need us. So that's my interest here. And I just kind of want to go around the room quickly. And if everyone can just kind of list why they joined the commission and maybe even how long you've been on it, because I don't think I know everybody's terms. And then what your professional background is, what kind of your expertise is.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I don't know how long I've been on the commission. I'm really sorry.
Longer than me.
At least 5 years. That's
Way longer than
that's
I
it,
do.
the best I can say based on I had my first child. I got my bachelor's and my master's in environmental studies, and my master's was in coastal geomorphology, studying salt marshes. So I particularly love this area and all the coastline we have. And I was an environmental consultant for a couple of years. I don't do that anymore. So this is my way of still like staying in the sciences and doing the stuff that I love to learn about. Whoever wants to go next.
Like Kate, I'm here because I'm staff. But I've been here it'll be 25 years in December. And ever since I've been here, it was right before I got here that they changed from a 75-foot to a 100-foot buffer. And a few years before that, I think it was a 25-foot buffer maybe, but it's always been a 100-foot buffer for the last 24 and a half years. And since I've been here, we've done a lot to educate the public and to do a better job of understanding our wetlands throughout the city, and added prime wetlands to the mix. One of the few communities in our area that has prime wetlands, just for a bunch of different reasons. Yeah, and I think, you guys have a really important role that even though you're advisory to the planning board, they really take what you say as what they should do. And I think that's almost always how it goes. But yeah, I think it's good to get together and hear how people think about things, and the public may watch it later, but I think they'll only learn from it, so I don't think you have to worry about that.
Good. Let's see, I had to look back at my notes. I take various notes. I joined in December of 2022, because I think Stuart, you and I joined the same month. I'll answer just a couple of things. I'll answer why did I sign up for it? I do a lot of nonprofit work. I'm retired now, so I like being involved in different things. I wanted to serve the city, but the more that I participated in the council, no offense, I love what they do, love all the folks. And people are like, oh, you should run for council. And the more I looked at it, I'm like, no, that's not a good fit for how I want to have impact. So I started looking at the other ways and looked at the commissions. I was mentioning, actually looked at the HDC first, and that interested me a lot. I live in the historic district. I feel strongly about the historic district. But I don't think there were any positions coming up, and I kind of wanted to get started, and this one did, and I looked at it and I thought, well, that's kind of aligned. And I'll tell you why. I don't have a formal background at all in this, but I grew up in a very small farming community, and I spent lots of time in our timber property, working on the farm, so not with wetlands specifically, but everyone in my family, because of that, is conservation minded from very young. So it's actually fun for me to learn about the wetlands, listening to all of you and the projects, because it's kind of net new. Now I can look back and think, oh yeah, in our timber property, we had wetlands and resources and such. So just my formal background is actually in aerospace engineering, and then I got an MBA, started a couple of companies, and sold those, and so I decided to retire. And now lots of different causes around the area. I work with Chase Home for Children and Crossroads and Gather and SPCA, and I also work with the business school over at UNH. So I keep myself quite busy. The other thing I'd say there is, I think there was a why. In general, I love Portsmouth, and I also love New Hampshire, so I'm interested in serving both. I like the state a lot, like all of us. I moved here intentionally and said, when I retire, this is where we want to live. So I want to try to protect what's good and natural about it, both the microcosm that we are in Portsmouth, and even more broadly, I am involved in some things, so.
Well, I joined the Conservation Commission in December 22. I had it in my notes. Thank you. And the reason why I joined is, so I didn't grow up here, moved here because my wife has had a house here for 25 years. But I've always said I wanted to get involved at a local level. I work in sustainability in general, so I'm a generalist. I don't have a hard science background, but I've worked and still do for very large corporations that make clothing. Think Gore-Tex or Gildan for t-shirts, like some of the world's biggest companies making that. The reason why I do that was I grew up in the Alps, and I saw the glacier where I grew up skiing go from glacier to an ice ski. So I started working in sustainability in ski resorts, and that's where I learned about wetlands. Even in the mountains, they're super important. They're sponges, they're biodiversity hotspots, and everything else. So it's all combined. And I think, Barbara, you reached out to my wife, and I was like, yeah, no, it's like, I'll do it. That's really how it happened. And I think this work is super important. I think we've been very lucky to not have any large floods or any incidents of like in Portsmouth, and we're kind of overdue. And so having these wetlands and making sure that they remain as a protection for floods and for the community in general, I think is really important, and that's really what we got involved.
Yeah, that's great. So actually, yeah, I originally was in Portsmouth on the recycling committee, which is totally defunct now, but with your wife. But that's, and so that's how I started getting involved in Portsmouth and committees and things like that, but and then I started a little bit after you started, like, I don't know, a few years, 5 years after maybe you started working or something.
I started in 2000.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, and I was working for the Department of Environmental Services at the time and doing outreach and education around water quality, really about stormwater. A lot of it was about stormwater. And so I was learning a ton, and it seemed like a good opportunity to learn even more, to be on the Conservation Commission and to learn a lot about the audiences that we were working with, that, you know, if we're working with different other conservation commissions all over the state, then there's opportunity to understand where they're coming from. And then I got to a point where that, learning about stormwater and the environment can ruin a lot of previous pleasures in life, like, you know, walking around and looking at a really nice house on the shore and saying, oh, that's a really cool house. And now it's like, oh my God, such a negative feeling, but it just seemed like the right place to keep staying here and continuing and having an opportunity to turn around and give back to Portsmouth. And because I really care about Portsmouth and what's happening here, and there's so much growth going on. So it just seemed like, you know, I'm not against growth, but it's, you know, I learned a lot about outreach. I learned about working with people, and it seemed like a really good opportunity. So.
Talia, I guess I joined like a year or so. I don't, it must
Seems longer.
a year, more than a year, maybe a year or two. And I think a lot about how my job is in real estate, and I have a lot of ability to impact people that are selling and buying if I'm like keeping top of mind my education, which was in sustainability and more specifically in supply chains, like global fashion industry supply chains. So that's my background, and yeah, why I'm here is twofold. One, because I think it like keeps me more sharp and just like involved in what I really care about. And especially because I'm involved in an industry that doesn't have to be like sustainable or really care. It's more important for me to be here. And I think something I think about a lot is like during our lives, we only have so many opportunities to be like to stand up for what we want. A lot of times, like I feel I'm like, oh, I'm so frustrated, like I can't impact this. But like this is something where I'm like, there are these hard moments where I can actually say, like, no, actually, like I'm not gonna go for that. I wanna do this, and like, here's why. So that's why I'm really excited about this meeting, because I think we've had a lot of instances on the commission recently where we're trying to figure out like what the right thing to do is and how to read the ordinances that we have in front of us. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I think it's like kind of like what Stuart was saying, is it's an ability that we all have to really make a difference in a time that we don't have that very often. So yeah.
Ditto to everybody. Yeah. My background is in kind of like environmental sciences. I did masters in wetland ecology, looking at like freshwater, coastal wetlands and the Great Lakes area. But I've kind of always been sort of a generalist. And then when I grew up in Portsmouth, haven't really lived here since, high school, and then moved back here 4 years ago. And the job that I took, my predecessor was on this commission. And when he was kind of like onboarding me and he was like, this is a way to like really learn a lot more about local government. And so that's kind of the piece that I'm like most excited to kind of learn about is just like how local government works. And I feel like just reading ordinances and understanding how ordinances are developed and enforced is all super interesting to me, but still a little bit confusing. And then, yeah, kind of care about Portsmouth and, you know, community's changed a lot since I was a kid. So it's just interesting to kind of think about how, I don't know, like what are the changes that I would love to kind of see for the city, and like, protecting wetland buffers and feel like is like a super cost-effective way to do so many different things, protect from flooding and wildlife and water quality. But also just, it's always like top of mind too, just like that this community has lost a lot of its like economic diversity since I was a kid. And just, I don't know, like, is there anything I can do to sort of help also ensure that we have like a diverse mix of housing options in this town? And it's also kind of top of mind. And so it's interesting to sort of think about the, like, how does permitting kind of come into that's sort of story. Yeah, that's enough for now.
Yeah, so I think I joined in January, which makes it easy. I think it was January of last year, so about a year and a half. When I joined, I was a full-time practicing architect, so I found myself on like the applicant side of the table a lot. Like I kind of really understand what we're looking at when they come forward, and I also feel like I kind of understand that there are many ways to skin the cat when the applicants come in front of us. So I feel like that's sort of a strength that I bring to what they're doing, that, you know, the parking lot doesn't always have to look the way that it shows up on our table. So I've done a lot of that work, you know, I've interfaced with civil engineers a lot and just like done a lot of land planning. My first job was really in like master planning, so really large scale or urban design projects. So that's what I was doing when I joined, and actually sort of as a side gig, I was an outdoor educator. So taking, you know, like our youngest citizens out into the woods and just like seeing things through their eyes. And like I see that very much as like part of building a healthier future. And so in the time since I've been here, I've transitioned from being an architect full-time to really doing outdoor ed full-time. So now I work for Kittery Land Trust. So I'm like absorbing a lot of what they do, and, you know, how conservation sort of is working on the land trust side. And I'm also pretty much full-time working with children and young adults in the outdoors. So I think like when you asked about like what my goals are for being here, or my goals for the commission, I think like a lot of the outreach and sort of being out in the community is something that I don't see us currently doing that much of, but it's interesting to me to see, like I've seen other conservation commissions in the area, like doing events or like, you know, just being sort of more vocal about various things. And so I'm just curious about how that might be part of what we do. And I think also others have mentioned like just the equity and sort of fairness component of what it's like to be on a commission is probably the hardest thing to me about what we're doing. Like, you know, it just feels like a homeowner who has a site that's just sort of compromised by, you know, things that would make them come before us. Like, how do we help them and be sort of consistent and transparent about what we're doing, but then also kind of balance the book when we have a big developer come up, and there are so many ways that they can have a more positive impact. So those are the things that like I don't really know how to grapple with. So I just appreciated like absorbing all this stuff from the meetings, but I think this meeting's gonna go a long way for me to figure out the approach to that. So it's not a case by case.
A lot of what all of you said resonated for me. So I have no idea how long I've been on the commission, but it was definitely before kids, so at least 8 years. And you were here when I got here, so
Maybe I'm
you've
10.
been here longer than I.
I
A different last name.
Yeah.
did have, oh.
Yeah.
And that's at least 9, maybe
Um,
10, we'll say 10.
for me, my educational background is not based on these things, but like Brian said, I think I grew up in a house where we were very sort of environmentally you know, yeah, just environmentally aware. So that's sort of always been on my radar, is appreciating nature and making sure you take care of it and leaving it better than when you found it, and those kinds of sentiments. And then similar to what others have said, I think I just wanted to find a way to get involved and engaged and be more of a participant in my community, and actually feel like I was giving back. And I don't know if this really coincided, but I will say one of the pieces that's, I think, been helpful for me and also interesting was becoming aware when we wanted to do work on our house that we sat in a wetland buffer, and that triggered all these things that I was not aware of when I bought my home. And so then, okay, what does that mean, and how does that change things that we had hoped to do, and all those kinds of things. So I think all of those pieces kind of landed me here.
Your realtor didn't tell you?
No, my realtor didn't do much, so she definitely didn't tell me that.
Great, well, thanks. And you guys kind of brought up a lot of the topics that we already are thinking of talking about. And so when Jess, Barbara, Peter, and I started kind of talking about what we wanted to say and maybe where we kind of wanted to steer the conversation, it really turned into more of a, let's just think of all the topics that we've brought up and see how people feel and kind of what they can conclude from that. So I think for us, maybe the first thing, which someone already brought up, I think Alice, you mentioned it, is consistency. That's something that we've kind of mentioned a lot in the last few months during the meetings, especially in front of applicants, is how are we looking at applications equitably, fairly, with consistency? Do we necessarily need to be consistent? Are there certain sectors where we need to be consistent and others need to be more equitable versus equality? So I don't know if we want to just start kind of discussing what we mean by being consistent, if it's residential versus commercial or different types of zoning, how different applicants approach us. But if anything kind of comes to mind when you're talking about consistency, where do you guys stand on where you want something to be consistent? Is it applications, procedures, kind of where do you see this topic kind of going? So maybe I'll just pick on Alice just because she mentioned it. Do you want to kind of dive into that a little bit more, what you were saying?
Yeah, okay. I feel like it gets thrown on the table when we're having trouble making a decision, and it's usually as a way to kind of tip it one way or the other. Whereas, I mean, usually I think we're fairly comfortable not looking back at the whole, history of the commission, trying to figure out how we should make a decision. It's more like, well, we're having trouble here. What have we done in the past? And so for me, like, that's one useful component, but you can also fall into the trap of like, well, we've always done it like this, so we should keep doing it like that. And like, I think consistency is important as long as it feels fair to the case in front of you. And so it's just a hard one. Like, I've appreciated when others have brought that up, like, because I don't have a knowledge of all these like previous cases necessarily, but I think it only goes so far. Like, I think we all sort of are here to have like respectable opinions about it, and like consistency helps weigh one side or the other, but I don't know. I don't feel strongly that we have to treat everything the same necessarily.
I think that's a really good point, because consistency in the application of the existing rules, I think, is key. But it is difficult to be consistent when you have one applicant that comes before the fact and one that comes in because he was caught cutting 25 trees. Or because you have a private applicant that just wants to build a shed, and then you have a commercial developer with which, and I wanted to mention this, I think that some of the best work that we've done is when we've pushed back, whether it was individuals or commercials, when we've pushed back and asked people to come back with alternative ideas. I think that's some of the best work that we've done. And I often feel probably the same as most of us here, but tell me if I'm wrong, kind of uncomfortable pushing back, but looking back, it is definitely when we've had the best outcomes.
I feel like, so I was like sitting down to look at these questions before this, and I've been kind of like at most of the meetings just going off of these three things. Like before I say anything, I'm just looking at what was the intent of the application, what's the scale of the project, and what's the impact. And those have been really helpful to me for everything. And then I think that kind of usually gets broken down into, is this an existing building or is this new construction? And then, because ultimately, even if it's like a homeowner that is doing, if they're like tearing their entire house down and doing a new build, even though they're not a developer putting in 50 new units, the scale and the impact and the intent are all different than if it's just someone who wants to put a shed in. So I don't know. I don't know how that fits in here, but I don't think we need like a whole overhaul in our consistency, but maybe like even having a small structure that we come up with to kind of understand like our starting points, it could be helpful. I don't know. Yeah. That's
I think too, sometimes, you know, like they might be just putting in a shed, but then because we see their entire property, it kind of opens up a can of worms, and I don't know necessarily how fair that is in some circumstances. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that, but
well, it kind of
like if
leads
you're
into-
coming in front of us, it should be known that that could happen, but I don't know if people understand that. I don't know.
Has it happened that somebody's come in for like a wee building here and we've got, excuse me, you have a massive thing in the 100-foot buffer over there. How the hell did that happen?
Well, it's probably not,
Does it
that it
happen?
probably wasn't a building necessarily,
No.
like, it's like,
Kinda though.
Yeah.
you know, you don't, just like you're mowing all the way up to the wetland, even just something as simple as that, and all they wanna do is put in a shed, and we're thinking like, well, you need to revegetate the whole 25-foot buffer, like, that's obviously something they were not expecting when they, I would think, when they came for the application. And
I mean,
like, just how do we feel about,
If someone inherits a property like from their family, it's been in their family forever and they've been doing like some activity there, I can't assume that they were educated on the wetland buffer. I just don't think that's a fair assessment to make. But
does that matter? I mean.
well, I think so, because
Cause you can't like claim ignorance as a reason for not.
but how are these people supposed to
Same
have
time.
been
No,
like
this is where my
educated? Like,
struggle is.
they may have bought this property under the full assumption that it wasn't under the wetland buffer at all. Maybe they don't even know what that is, and they have this whole plan, and it's like, that to me doesn't feel like the point of this commission to like stop people from doing things that they didn't even know about. Whereas like a developer is fully aware of these things and maybe has had this land for a long time, and they like plot and plan to be able to do these things that are like completely throwing like a huge impact that is going to disrupt everyone on a much larger scale. So I don't know, I do see them like really different, and I don't think it's kind of black and white to me on that part.
Yeah.
For me, there's a little bit of procedural stuff, and Kate and I have kind of talked about this because I can think of a recent meeting where just based on the information I had, because I had not been able to attend the site walk, and I appreciate that this commission is objective and they look at each application individually, and it's hard because we're often comparing oranges to apples, right? And so how do you find consistency in that effort? But as I sat on the commission, one of our applications, we were having to discuss the fact that they were mowing within the 25-foot buffer. They were also expanding a property, which we never really addressed that piece, the addition of the building within the buffer. And based on the application, the other one had cut down 2 trees. Now, I say it's procedural because I did not attend the site walk, and so I did not know that there was more clear cutting and some other things that had happened. But on paper, our 2 recommendations for those applications, in my opinion, did not necessarily feel consistent about what we were expecting from each of those applicants. And so I think that's some procedural pieces that we all need to make sure, like, you know, and Kate and I kind of talked about this because Kate and Peter are usually talking to applicants before. So and not always, sometimes applicants don't engage with them at all, but I often feel like they are my go-to for information because I've assumed that they've had a lot of discussion and interaction. And so just getting a sense of like, is that the case? Like, have you had conversations, to your point, Talia, like, have they been told about the wetland buffer? Do they know what that means based on their property? Have they been given this information? Just so we can have more information when we are making, or if somebody, you know, for people who don't make the site walk, just so you're all aware, this is, you know, if there's anything unusual or additional or something that came out of it, it would be helpful maybe if we could spend a couple minutes talking about that piece as well before we started making our recommendations and things, because I feel like that's some of the pieces that get lost.
So I wonder, because Barbara, Kate, Peter and I, on the Wednesdays we have meetings, we have a pre-meeting at 10 a.m. And I feel like a lot of the things you said, like kind of the backstory of a lot of these properties that you guys don't get, we have the chance to ask questions and do get some of that. And I wonder if there's some way to then, I don't know, do a little synopsis of that, like the key points, and somehow get it before the board. I don't know.
I think part of the staff report tries to address some of that, but it doesn't do it. You can't ask any questions of it, you just
Right.
get it given to you, so.
It's helpful context, and I think we've all agreed that I find the site walks to be
They're so,
incredible.
yeah.
I
And I
think the
try to
sidewalks
make
are-
every one, because if I don't make one and then I have to listen, it's feels completely different to me than if I was there and saw it. And then I always make sure I do read those reports from you all.
I feel like I can't go.
It usually helps me for me, as someone who's learning all of this, even still, I can look at it and go, okay, I've got my head around it, because I do my reading and prep, and then I kind of read that, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm in the right swim lane for this one.
And I think staff reports reflect a little bit about how you got to know the applicant too, on some level, because, and hope this is okay to mention, but having been involved on regulatory issues from the state level, we can sit there and hear an applicant come in and say they didn't know. But a lot of the times they really did know. And not everybody's out there playing, it's not an even playing field for the applicants either. I mean, some of them are skilled and they hire engineers, but they will try to get their engineers to do, like you say, you know, all those things that, you know, are very challenging for us to listen to and try to make a decision on. But then there's also the homeowner who will come in and they'll have a certain background and they will be difficult, you know, and we don't know that. I mean, we just see what they present to us. So anything, but I mean, I don't even know it's appropriate for you guys to say to us ahead of time and to.
Yeah, we can only say so much and only have so much perspective, but I think Talia brought up a good point about the scale, like you have the homeowner who's not as educated or sophisticated on the rules, and then a developer who is, but the scale of the project might be a lot smaller for the homeowner, and I think that's something to think about when you're being consistent. Are you okay with a small impact compared to the big impact the developers might could have is gonna have, even though they're gonna offset it with something else, it's still a much bigger impact. So being consistent across scale is really hard.
It's the consistency thing, and I think we've all thought a lot about this. I'm someone who's very used to, I guess, like many of you, having to understand very detailed, like government regulations and such, and then applying them and making decisions. And this is the way that I think about this, and this is just me sharing, I'm not saying it's exactly right, but it's the way that I think. At the end of the day, there's some pretty very specific things in the ordinance and the guidelines, and then within that, there's some ability to navigate and interpret. But what I wouldn't agree with at all is that if someone, even if they truly are unaware, if we had some sort of lie detector test and we could tell they weren't aware, to me, I don't believe it matters. And I'm just using a legal definition. If you were to look at the ordinance and let's say that, you know, that they egregiously were not within the basic ordinance. And you were to say, but we're going to allow for this and this and this and this because you didn't know. That's a super slippery slope, right? That begs for a lawsuit
I do too.
against the city. So I try really hard to look at each one from and when I think consistency, I'm thinking fairness. I'm thinking my only job really at the end of the day is to look at the ordinance and see if it matches the ordinance and the associated regulations, yes or no, and where do we have any ability to work with them outside of that. If it's clearly in violation, there's where to me, you have to, when I think of consistency, that's what I'm thinking about. Are we consistent in with each? Because here's why, and someone in the city said this and I liked it because it's the way I think. When you come before a commission as either a citizen or a developer for that matter, you have an expectation that there's going to be fairness and a lack of bias for your particular case, just like for anybody else. At least that's my expectation. When I expect that there's no personal bias. I expect that, you know, based on what I know or who I am or whatever. And so I'm always trying to think about that. And so that's how I think about my role and the commission's role.
Well, while you're talking about those criteria that you're using to make yourself unbiased, the other important fact is that the only thing that matters if this, you know, if you didn't say you deny something and the planning board goes along with it and they deny it, the judge is going to look at these criteria that were used to make the decision on that application. And that's what's the case is going to be about, is did they follow the criteria or not?
That's
it,
my
those
point. It's
criteria.
black
At the end of the
and white.
day, you have to feel comfortable that those criteria would be enough to defend your decision, whether it's, you know, no or yes. It's did I look at these criteria and did they work for me? And this is what the planning board chair wants to talk to you about too, is he doesn't feel like the criteria are specific enough. And I think we've had this back and forth for years. And it's really difficult to make them really specific because, as you all know, every application, even if it's two people coming in for a shed, they can be totally different apples to oranges, you know? So you can't necessarily say, oh, we're gonna approve all sheds in the buffer because they don't have as much impact. Well, if you wanna say that, that's fine, but it might not meet the criteria and they might be taking more vegetation away on one than another, and there might be closer to the wetland or further, but if you can tie it back to the criteria, then you can take these somewhat subjective criteria and make a decision that you all can agree on. I think that's a really important point.
For me, there's sort of like a blanket when I'm looking at applications, especially those sort of tricky residential ones that I have the most trouble with, frankly, because sometimes it doesn't feel like that big of a deal, but we're trying to be consistent, right? Like to me, I sort of have this sort of blanket lens I put over it. Like, are they making a reasonable effort to respect the buffer and kind of give back what they're taking away in some like balanced way. You know, if you're gonna cut down 2 giant trees, like putting up 2 saplings doesn't feel like it makes sense, you know, but if there's some like reasonable effort, like in the case of that mowing the wetland application, like, yeah, we didn't wanna, I think, have them remove their entire lawn, but there was sort of, there had to be something given back to be able to feel like we're having a conversation that feels fair, to like give any concession to the criteria. And there's nothing really in the criteria that says that, like, there's sort of a reasonable balance of give and take. But that's kind of how I end up looking at them, which gets me into trouble sometimes because I'm not sure, like, it doesn't feel like every application's the same in that regard, or like what is a good balance, I'm not sure, but.
I mean, if we were actually just looking at the ordinance, we wouldn't really be giving as much as we do, though. That's where I get confused here, like. We
Right.
would, and so that is kind of where. Maybe we don't wanna use the word intent, but like, that's. If someone is putting in when we're saying someone putting in a reasonable effort, like that means that they're being thoughtful, that they know what's going on, and that like. They are, I don't know, it's intent, like that kind of is part of it, and so, yeah, it's black and white, but we're not. With every single application, if we were to be very black and white to the ordinance, I think we would be denying a lot more applications. A lot more applications. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but like, it doesn't seem like we're necessarily taking on a lot of liability. I think if anything, we've been like giving a ton, and so. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's helpful just to kind of point out to applicants, because we are seeing a lot of technical violations of the ordinance when we have applications for a shed or for a new home that show that they're mowing the 25-foot buffer, or that they have yard clippings that they dump in the wetland. These are violations, but we're not necessarily enforcing them on the staff side. But I think when they come as an application, it's the perfect time to really educate everyone in the meeting, everyone that's watching online. This is really important to us, but we're also letting you get away with it because we know that you'll do something better. So the whole idea of intent that you guys are talking about, I think it's really important to be very vocal about, you know, how much you're giving and how willing you are to work with these homeowners, given the fact that in reality, even if they don't know it, they are violating the ordinance in a lot of small ways that may seem silly, but are crucial to protecting these systems. So I think the whole education piece is really, really needed every time we see these applicants who might be new homeowners.
I know, I've been thinking about that too, whether there's like, I think Kelly, you brought this up too, like, is there a way to use our meetings to be like even a little bit more articulate about our purpose and our goals and the rules, like just like a really succinct little thing, like, here's the thing we say to every applicant, just so you know, really our big picture goal here today is, and these are the 3 things we're gonna think about really seriously. I don't know, like somehow just have a little pitch that we say every day.
Well, maybe that's different than what I'm gonna say, but.
Yeah,
Through that balancing though, like what you're saying is, we wouldn't ordinarily approve this shed in the buffer, but you're planting this nice garden, or we're requiring you to, or we're agreeing that planting a nice garden is gonna offset the impact of that shed or something. So putting that out there and showing them the balances you're making and what you're deciding on is also really helpful for the planning board too. They look at your minutes and they
It
see,
becomes part of the public record too.
and it becomes part of the public record. It's what are you, you know, you might feel like you're giving something away, but if they're doing something that's making it better, then, you know, at the end of the day, you're trying to balance it. I think, you know,
Harder for the smaller projects is like, you know, if they've hired an architect or an engineer to do these plans, like we're seeing them when they've already invested a lot to get that done, and then we're saying, well, couldn't you just move that edge of the building 3 feet over, and like, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but
it's expensive.
then they have to go back through and maybe come back again, and so I don't, like, it almost feels like work sessions or like pre-meetings or something
try.
would
We always
help.
try to encourage that, because once they get farther down the road, they get dug in and it's harder.
Yeah.
But that's where you can say no. It's like you can, and you can say, it looks like we're gonna deny this application unless you wanna take it back and change it, and then we'll hear it again. But these
Yeah.
are the things we have issues with. If you can be really clear with people.
Has anyone ever thought about like having like 2 times a year, like an open to the public, not like meeting, but like discussion where it could be like, is your home in the wetland buffer? Like before you go and do anything, like come talk to us. And it's like, I don't know if it could be a not recorded meeting, but just a time when people could come in and like ask questions and learn about it if they're curious. And then maybe instead of just going and getting an architect, maybe they would come and have a work session with us beforehand and they could ask questions and then they could go and like essentially save money and not. Cause obviously we put a lot of time in and
Yeah.
it's not like we're trying to add more to everyone's plates, but I feel like if there were the like set times that everyone knew about and it was posted, then it's like we're offering this education to you before you ever go through the process.
Kind of like office hours.
Yeah,
Come and ask your questions. You
or
have-
maybe even
you
something
have
like
a
that instead.
project? Do you know if you're in the wetlands?
Well, same with HDC stuff. I almost feel like you could do like a whole citywide thing. Like, I wanna put 2 windows on my house, like, can I do that sort of thing? Or I'm thinking about putting a deck on the back of my house, like, what do I need to know? You
So-
know,
So the only problem with that is that then consistency, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
who do they meet with? Who do they ask the questions of? And then if, yeah, and if it's staff, then they're gonna hold them to it. Yeah, they're gonna be
True.
like, you told me this, cause
Well, what we usually tell them is, here's what we think, how to interpret the ordinance. We can't guarantee the commission's gonna agree with us, but this is what we
Right.
think, how it'll go from our experience. And I think the same thing would fall for you guys. If someone talked to 1 or 2 of you, you'd have to make that caveat, like, this is what I think, but I'm only one member of the commission, you know, so
And-
I think as
and-
long as that's clear.
is that not a problem though, as far as like, cause there was somebody that came to the mayor that wanted to talk to Sam about what was going on. Do we run into a problem with the commissioner that talked to that person has now?
Well, if it's about a specific project and you say, I'll vote for that if you do it this way, then yeah. But if it's, you know, more general and here's what we make our decisions on and here's what we're trying to protect, give them the more the background and the big picture, I think that's fine. If they're looking for an answer and then you're gonna commit to something before you even have a meeting with your other commissioners, that might be a problem.
And if you give your opinion, that's not, it's,
I don't think your opinion is, you know, I guess if it's specific on the project, then it's probably better you don't, you know.
I think
This
there's
way.
also the whole, like, is the project submitted yet? Is
Yeah.
it gonna scheduled for a board meeting?
Yeah.
If it's just an idea, then I think it's probably more forgiving to be able to like give your own personal opinion.
But if you say, I'll never approve a house on that lot, then yeah, you probably shouldn't vote on it because you've kind of said where you stand.
right, you have to just be really careful.
Well, you could have like a really pretty detailed set of criteria of like what could be discussed and not at those types of events, so that it would just mean that it's not like site specific and that we're just here to answer questions generally. I don't know.
Wonder what the awareness is of the working sessions.
Right.
Hmm.
Because I know that I myself, before I became familiar with this commission and the other commission such, I wasn't very aware that you could go to a session like that. I also wasn't really aware that if you wanted to, you could go up to whichever floor to the planning folks and
Yeah.
ask questions. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to raise the awareness that that's a tool available, and it really helps to get a bunch of stuff figured out, because I guess I haven't ever kept statistics, but it does seem like the ones that come for a couple of working sessions, it starts to actually build a relationship between the commission and that party in a positive way. And so then when it gets to the end, everybody's on the same page. And I just don't know how many people are actually aware and what we might be able to do to raise awareness that we want to help you succeed. with your proposal, and there's people and tools available to you well before the time that it comes for a final decision.
Well, on our webpage where we click, you know, or someone clicks to submit an application, does it say anything like, hey, are you sure you're ready? Maybe try doing a work session first. I don't know if there's.
I don't think it says that. I mean, we tell people when they talk to us.
Yeah, cause I wonder if just seeing that, cause I'm sure people are thinking of a project and they're like, huh, I wonder what this application entails. And then
Yeah.
maybe they'd go there and they'd see like, oh, okay, maybe I can do a work session first. And I don't know if that would be a
Yeah.
place to put it.
No, I think it could. We could add something like that, some kind of flow chart or something of the different opportunities to
Like-
engage with staff and with the commission informally before you submit your project.
Yeah.
Because it's true, once they hire their architect and they've got their site plan, they don't want to hear from you that you don't want to approve it.
Yeah.
They just want to go ahead and, you know, part of that is them hiring the right people that understand our ordinance and have done it before and know what may get approved and what won't. But
Well, that's,
some people don't have that sophistication.
I mean, that's a good point, like for a homeowner to either come and meet with staff or suggest that their consultant do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that, it's like,
Yeah.
that would be, save so much time for a lot of these applications, I think.
And probably ultimately money then for them too.
Yeah, so I think the same thing, like sort of if there's a flow chart or like
Yeah.
suggestions before you start, like get your plot plan, like, do you have a survey, you know, and then have you met with staff or something like that? you know?
Yeah.
But there certainly is another side of that of people that don't really want to know. They want to do what they want to do and they're going to push forward with it no matter what. And that's just the
Trying to
reality. of it.
tell of those applicants.
There also seems to be some inconsistency, I guess we're using that word a lot. I mean this in a slightly different way. Particularly on the individual resident that are bringing something forward and they're not very sophisticated or this, you know, doing presentations and coming before a commission, and that's not their thing, right? That's not their personality. And I think we've even talked about it a little bit. I've thought a number of times, it seems like for whatever reason, they don't know what a good, solid proposal that will get through on the first time is gonna look like. We were talking about this before everyone came forward. Like, I'm super AR. As an aerospace engineer, I'm super AR. So I've gone before like the HDC probably 4 different times with some pretty complex proposals, Windows being one of them. But I'm just gonna, you'll see the point that I'm making with residents for this. I went through and I looked at past applications of the type that I was going. I looked at some of the meetings around those particular things. And by the time that I was done, I knew exactly what that commission was expecting in terms of what were they expecting in terms of a
Right.
presentation, what were the likely questions that they were going to ask. And I was telling Sam, I'm pretty proud, right? Because the one was a pretty difficult, I'd seen lots of them come back 3-4 times on Windows. I got mine approved the very first time, but it was because it was super prepared. But not everybody thinks like that or has that background of working with those kind of things. And so we try to do this, I think, when we're out on those field visits. You do this and I try to do it now because I saw you do it.
I do it because you started doing it.
Somehow, because there is even a basic formula that we're expecting. Like, think about the just by way of stark example, think about the person that comes in and they're like, hi, my name's Bob. I want to build a shed. And
That's the end of their.
and that's it. They don't have any of the, and I'm not trying to be harsh. We've seen some of those, right? And I feel for them because our expectation is that it isn't that you have to do this, but our expectation is that you're going to have some pictures, you're going to answer these things, and it doesn't have to be fancy. Remember who came in just recently that was down on whatchamacallit road?
Anfield.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was,
with the
yeah,
trees, great.
yeah, and it was completely hand-drawn, and that didn't matter, but he understood the expectation of, here's kind of the basics that you've got to have in order for it to flow for the commission. And so I've been trying to think about,
Well,
you know,
it's in the checklist. It's, if
I
we
saw
talk to
that.
them, we tell them. Some people, even if they read the checklist and you talk to them and you say, and we even say, the commission's probably gonna ask about, can you put some stuff in your application about your plants and what they might be and where
Yeah.
they're gonna go? And can you talk about how much impervious surface? We need a percentage. And some things are like, it's a hard line and they can't go before you guys until we get that. But sometimes it's just like pulling teeth. We might meet with them, Kate might meet with people 5 times and they still don't get it, you know?
yeah, so, well, some
So-
people just aren't going to
Templates?
get it.
Huh?
Can we put a simple template with exactly those questions?
We have it.
So they have,
Yeah.
it's really,
Yeah.
it's
Really
though,
used, yeah.
it's new, so,
Well, have we seen improvement since we've had the
Yeah.
checklist?
I mean, it really.
Yeah, actually, people have realized that parts of the ordinance are required, like the
Are
wetland
real?
buffer enhancement plan. If you like are proposing increasing your impervious surface, you have to do a wetland buffer enhancement plan, which a lot of people didn't realize.
Hmm.
And the same with the driveway thing. Like, I think some people, some regulars had forgotten that new driveways in the buffer are required to be porous pavement. And that's one of the checklist items because it's required. So I think the checklist has helped get those basic things back, but it is like few and far between where there are some people that kind of fall through the cracks and either don't have the time or energy to really go above and beyond, or don't have the technical expertise to go on Map Geo and turn on the wetland buffer layer and draw on top of it, or they just get frustrated by the fact that they have to submit anything to us at all. So that's kind of rare, but I do think people are getting a lot better at least meeting the basic requirements outlined in the ordinance. It's the photos and the extra stuff, the supporting materials that really help us make our decision. Oh, shoot. I totally forgot.
Make them faster anyway, right? Because we eventually get around to somehow, if they don't have the pictures and the diagrams and everything else, we end up asking all the questions until we actually understand it. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of efficiency.
Yeah.
When some people, a few times people have come to me because I know I'm on the commission and they're like, how do I get something through? And I tell them just about the story I told you a minute ago. I said, I think the easiest way is to anything that comes before the commission is available in the public domain. And you can very easily, I do this all the time. I go look for, when I'm wanting to get a permit for something, I go find 3 applications that look very similar and I go look for the ones that got approved. And then I'm a big believer in just borrowing and reproducing, and I
Yeah.
pull those. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, look, go look at what is presented at one that got approved. Go watch the session and see how fast it went. And you will know exactly approximately what you will have to present, and not just criteria, but what is the commission expecting to see that helps them be able to get their head around it quickly and be able to arrive. Not everybody's wired that way, but a lot of people don't know that. They're like, oh, that's all out there. I'm like, yeah, every application, the minutes from every meeting, the recordings, you can go find the recipe for what it is that you're going to bring before the commission. You can find 3, 4 examples of it. And if they get within a ballpark of any one of those, it ends up going a lot faster, right? For us. So whatever we can do, I think, to help people understand kind of what's that formula, the checklist. I think Kate, you and the team do a good job of helping them. If they contact you and they ask for help.
Yeah. Can't help someone who doesn't.
Yeah, you can't help
Want
if they don't
help.
want it or they don't wanna put a little bit of effort in. That's really what it
Yeah.
comes
Or
down
if they just wanna do what they wanna do when they,
Yeah.
which is a few people.
Yeah, you get all different kinds of people, all different, I mean, everything. There's so many variables.
I was just trying to think about like a way that's like not paperwork and not more written information that could like get to people. And I don't know if a lot of these people that we're dealing with are so technologically not inclined that this wouldn't work, but like if we could create like a 3-minute video on like, hey, this is what's important to us, we're the commission, like, hello. And then we put that like where
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
looking at like, click here. Some people, like I see many applications that we've seen recently, I'd say like people in their like mid-40s would probably click on that video and like they might say, oh geez, maybe I shouldn't hire this like engineer or architect right now. Maybe I should schedule a work session first. Or maybe I should even just have these people come out to my property and start the application, but not hire this person yet, so that it's like catching, I feel like a lot of this is just trying to catch people, at least for the permits that aren't after the fact, catch people so that we can do a little education, so that people feel like they're not just like set up to fail when they come to the
Blindsided, yeah.
meetings. Yeah.
I like the media
Good
thing.
idea.
Yeah, different than text.
Cause some people are not gonna read, some people can't like really read. I know that sounds crazy, but like people make it a long time in life where they can't understand that
This is pretty
complex.
technical, let me just.
It's very
Looking at the
technical.
checklist, it isn't written in a layperson.
It's pretty overwhelming. Like I look at that, I'm like,
I think there could be a little like, here's the official language, and then here's the rotated, and then here's the.
What does this mean? Like when they put the little question mark with the circle next to things? and you
I
click
know,
on it,
yeah.
You're like, what does this mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's something I'd be willing
Yeah.
to work on if that was like a project
cool.
that could be assigned to someone. But I
So
definitely need help with the content.
I'm just like, there's like.
Yeah, I mean, there's some content on there about different, what the wetland buffer is and why it's there. There's some content about different things you can do, but a little video might be a good idea. I mean, sometimes that's, it could be different things. Did you know kind of videos? Short,
Like what wetland plantings look like.
Yeah, a little bit like the
Sort of
visual and the
like, yeah,
aesthetic,
right,
you
or
know?
what a planting
So-
plan looks like.
So we have like 3 things to get so far, like out of this, is that, so we want to encourage people to do the pre-meeting, to do a work session, right? And
So,
we can do that through partly through the website, but the video would be great. One little video on that, maybe some other videos.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to use AI tools and such to create in fact, I'm amazed at how easy it is to produce those kind of things these days.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be super fancy either, you know?
Yeah, and then maybe look at the checklist a little closer to see if there's more of a explanation, like more of a layperson version that can, or.
and the flow chart too, I don't know if that's maybe encompassed in the media thing, but the flow chart, Peter was kind of, I don't know if you said it, but like, there's kind of the step 1, like, are you ready for a full application? Yes, great. No, here are the things to do first or something like that.
Yeah. It seemed like the last couple work sessions we've done, I feel like the applicants have walked away not feeling very helped. Like work sessions are tricky, because they kind of do want to be like, so are you gonna approve it
Right,
or not,
And how
and
much
like.
can you say without seeing like the actual application?
well, on that last one we had, I think there wasn't a it wasn't a work session. We should have just told them to put an application in, because that's all they really wanted to do was come.
Get it done.
That
Well,
was
there's
the-
two, there was
the
like the,
point.
yeah, there's that one and then there's the
So
Marina one.
maybe it's staff, we have to be more clear with them that this is supposed to be a exploration of what you could do on your property rather than getting them to agree. If you just want to do that and that's all you want to do and you're not willing to talk about other options, then
That's
not
I
what
like that,
application-
yeah, I think that's a
it's
good
not what a work
message.
session's for.
Yeah,
Because I do think a lot of people just want what they want and they don't really want to have a dialogue. They just did it because they thought it might be a good idea.
Yeah, so
Right.
maybe even an explanation more of what happens at a work session, what is a work session? Is it right for you?
Yeah, yeah. Not for everybody.
I like the ones with the site visits first, too.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking like, we don't wanna go so far as to like saying like, yeah, we'll do site visits anywhere, and then
Yeah,
it's
I
like
know.
going all over the place, and then some of these people never even do an application, but like,
Right.
if there's a way to figure out that someone is serious and we can go to the site first and then have the work session, and then they go and hire their help, and then they come before us, that's like the most ideal flow, I think.
Or could we do site visits without there being like a in the meeting session? You know what I mean? If what they really want is just like somebody to come out to the property and walk around and chat.
You
know,
could do a
Yeah.
site visit, but
without,
We usually do that as staff too. We'll go out
yeah,
and walk around. But for the most part, most of the work session applicants do ask for a site visit first. Some people, I think like John Shagnon and Eric Weinrib in the past for a few applications have wanted to wait until they put the full application in before having the site walk because they want to make sure like they know what they're staking out is what they're going to submit.
Mm.
But I think for the most part, that's kind of the applicants for the work sessions really do want you to be on site to like show them like what you want.
I guess my question is, could we just do the site visit and skip the like in the meeting room and city hall part? Do you know what I mean? Like just to make it like easier on us and easier on them, like,
You mean have the meeting?
Work session, site walk.
yeah, that's just a site.
Yeah, then it would just be a meeting
that's
that
a
we'd
meeting
have to record
problem.
But could we just like record it? Like,
Well, then
with our iPhones.
Yeah. No, but like written minutes, you mean, or?
there's an
we
expectation.
required to
public-
have like actual written minutes if we have a recording that is like uploaded? Or could they
Not the
just be?
minutes so much, it's the, like, expectation the public should be able to attend a public meeting of a board.
Oh, well, I guess they could.
And they could attend, but not everybody can attend, like, not everybody's
So it's not, yeah.
meeting you out there
that's
to
not
say, walking the site.
No, okay, I see.
So,
They're not really.
so that's why I always say, you can ask questions, but you can't have that sort of dialogue that you're talking about at a site, you shouldn't anyway,
Huh.
according to state rules.
I feel like that's a flaw. I'm just like not blaming anyone, but like,
Yeah.
is that anything that could be?
No, it's
I
fine.
think it is worth thinking about, like, are there ways to kind of streamline things a tiny bit, just to be more like customer service oriented, but.
Well, maybe just explaining that to the applicant up front then. I
That
don't know. You had said that
to
like
do a work session.
you could have like a little thing that we say when we go to the site walk that's like, hey, like this is what we can and can't talk about today based on our like rules and like explain what a quorum is to them so that we're like they understand we're trying to be helpful. It's just this is what we're bound to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've done that like maybe once.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
consistency, no.
It is a little confusing. Is there like a general like vibe that like in this room, or I'm actually curious about the planning board too, that we should be a little bit stricter, like should be like a little more holding steady to these ordinances in a more robust way? Other than,
I don't think so. I don't think there's, I think the planning board's been comfortable with what's come to them. I think they've recently they voted in alignment pretty regularly. I don't think it's been a long time since there's been cases where the commission approves something and the planning board denies it. And there's been places where the commission denies it and the planning board approves it. So we've had both, but it seems like lately it's been pretty consistent.
I'd like to have some feedback on cases like that, so that.
Feedback from the planning board.
Yeah, we voted
Went one
different,
versus
we
the
went
other,
one
yeah.
way versus you went the other way, just so that we understand.
But there's not,
No,
your guys's.
It's never happened.
In the last few years anyway, it hasn't really happened.
Okay, but if it did, it would be great to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, I think usually they take your efforts as, adequate. They look at it and they decide. I think if they had a problem with it, they'd say something. But
What about, like, from the other side of things, like from the applicant, from the public perspective, like, I don't know what anyone has heard about, sort of, is it hard to push these things through? Is it arduous, or is it?
I think there's people on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, there's people that think that too much gets through, and there's people that think that it's crazy. Why are they so strict?
Yeah.
I think it's people's perspective, what their knowledge base is, what they care about.
I think there's a general, we were talking about this earlier, and I'll be interested to see what you all hear. I do hear from quite a few folks in my various roles, and for better or for worse, there's in my experience, there's a feeling that this particular commission is easier to work with than the other organizations. HDC is the best one to be able to compare it to. And I'm not picking it on those guys. I like all of them. I think it's true too, by the way. I was saying it. I think the personalities and the demeanors in our interactions with the folks in the room are always much more measured. If you haven't watch the other commissions, watch a typical meeting, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know what they think about, do we give too much or not enough? That probably varies by any person, but the commission itself as a whole and as the individuals. And I've gotten some of that feedback. I don't go into deep conversations afterwards, but on several occasions, I'll give you, for instance, the one where they're building over at Christmas Tree Shop. I think it was the very night afterwards that we had done the final approval that I saw their lead attorney at the country club. And so he comes up and starts talking, and I'm like, it's okay to talk now or not. We've made our decisions. It's not gonna influence it. And and it was at the end, right? So he had nothing to gain from what he said. And he said that. He said, well, you all were a little demanding, and it took multiple times, but he's like, at the end of the day, we thought that what you asked for and the way that you asked for it was, I can't remember what words he used, but reasonable and collaborative, what have you. He didn't think like we were hard asses and terrible to work with, or even though that one did take however many turns
Long time.
that it took.
But the outcome was great. I mean.
Yeah,
we
I
got
thought so also.
small wetlands.
And they seem to think that the outcome was good.
Just,
Was good also.
I see you pulling the face.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking about that application. Yeah, just remember all those meetings and discussions and.
I'm glad you brought that one up, because I feel like we've spent most of this meeting talking about the small applications, but I think the ones that maybe maybe we should talk a little bit about those big ones, like where the developers are coming through in their 200-page applications, and it's quite easy to miss major things. And I don't know how you all approach, like, when we have one of those, how to even get your head around the full application and know what you want to say about them. But I don't know, just seems like something we should probably think about too.
I find it difficult because there's so much more than this. And to use a practical example, development next, it's not Great Bay, but the marsh where
It's a
the
big red building right now.
big red building. Go for
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and I'm like,
Radio station.
how
I
do
cover my
get
eyes.
that through? Or I really feel like I missed something on that one. Because we were
Me
looking
too.
at how close it was, but I didn't get that perspective from the meeting. So maybe it's
The
just me.
magnitude of the
Yeah,
building.
the scale of the building, yeah.
I mean,
Totally did that.
obviously everyone can always read every single thing to the last detail, but would there be any sense in like not assigning sections for like, you have to, like, you're responsible for this, but more just like, okay, everyone's responsible for everything, but like just saying pages 1 through is for this person this month, and like that way it gives you a little more like accountability to be like, okay, this is the part you can do a deep dive in, read everything. And that way when we come together, at least every section of it has like one person's real deep focus on it. So maybe things get caught. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard of other commissions. I mean, I think it could happen like a little bit informally, maybe it already does, but like people do tend to look at the stuff that they understand well, like you look at the site plans in a totally different way than I do. And
Yeah.
some people look at the plants, some people look at the stormwater, like.
Yeah, I think bringing your expertise to the table is one thing, but to say that you're only gonna study this part of the plan would be tricky.
Yeah, I don't mean that. I just
Yeah.
mean like,
Yeah.
I get what
I
you're
don't,
saying.
I don't know, like, I feel like maybe,
So nothing gets missed.
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I mean, it could be another question that we go around and are just like, if you had to pick one thing to really focus hard on, you know, like I'm gonna really try to understand the stormwater flow on every single project that goes
Maybe
before
that's
us. And
better,
I'm gonna
yeah.
really look at the like vegetation piece and the tree piece and I'm, you know, like, and maybe we don't wanna put that on the record.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there's a little bit of,
Great idea, but I
yeah,
think you should
okay.
look, everybody has to look at the whole application,
Yeah.
but, you know.
Yeah.
If you wanna talk to another commissioner about what that has an expertise in plants and get a better perspective, they might know more. I think that's gonna happen. People are gonna focus on their areas.
What do you all do for those really monolithic, I'm speaking to Kate, I guess, first and foremost. What do you all, what all have you done on those ahead of us for the, because it's as much for you to consume as it is. As
Yeah.
it is, I will tell you, when I see one of those, I'm like, holy shit, first of all. So then I almost always go to your notes to kind of give me some
Cliff notes?
grounding
Yeah.
that I can go, okay. This, I should probably, if I only have this much time, I should look at this. That's how I do it. I don't know if it seemed reasonably effective because you all seem to have a greater aptitude and eye to know in one of those big ones, what things in a particular one are the key points. I've seen that a number of times, so
We also might see them through the TAC process too. We might see them in other places too, but
So this isn't your first time.
Pre-meetings.
I'll let Kate answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger ones, we definitely talk to applicants beforehand, but I think you're bringing up the key points. It's kind of tricky because in the staff memo, sort of the description piece is really focused on the impact numbers, which can be kind of deceiving. And I think a lot of times that's how applications for big projects try to portray themselves, is with their impact numbers and how they're offsetting it.
Yeah,
In my mind, I write that description and Peter writes that description, and it's helpful and it's good for the legal description for the planning board. But my real analysis is just like my own personal opinion of the 6 criteria and how they kind of flow with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So is this the alternative with, or is this the project with the least impact? Is this like the only alternative? Like that's a huge one that always gets me because there's so many different perspectives that you can have for all 6 of the criteria, where that's where it's like very important for everybody to bring their own perspective, because some people might not see the impact that is happening, whereas a salt marsh expert might realize, oh, this is going to impact the salt marsh. Whereas me, who's not a salt marsh expert, might say that criteria is met because I didn't understand that salt marsh impact. It's really tough as staff, but I think we at least try to get the basics in terms of requirements, and then kind of leave most of the interpretation up to you and kind of give you our own opinions with that, because Peter and I are invested and we're, you know, really protective of the wetlands. So we try to give our opinions as well, even though we can't vote.
I
Super helpful.
I can tell, again, I don't know if, this is formulaic in my mind, when I look at that, and I look at those 6 things and I see what you've written, I read it and I'm like, and by the time that I'm done, I can tell just from that, whether it's here, and it helps guide me. I mean, again, I have, like all of you, I have a limited amount of time. Sometimes I've consumed that whole packet. Sometimes I haven't been able to consume very much. So again, I read this and I actually try to take away, well, how did Kate feel about this thing? And I can tell whether it's like, okay, it's reasonably close, or, oh my God, this thing is a train wreck. And so it guides me. It doesn't guide me in a sense that then I'm biased. It guides me in how much time do I spend on that particular thing in that packet versus the ones that I'm like, okay, this looks like it's pretty aligned. That's the only way. When, on those ones, when the packet has like 4 different ones that have 200 pages each, that's like the only way that I'm able to pick and choose where do I consume more versus less. So I don't know if that works for everybody, but it seems to be pretty, it seems to be pretty accurate as to what actually happens in the meeting with the fund itself.
For the staff memo, you only write them about the local conditional use permits. You don't write them about the DES applications.
That's right.
Right.
Is there a way to? Have
Can
you
you?
both?
No,
No, is that?
don't say anything, Kate.
Okay, that's totally, is it?
Well, it's not our, I guess the reason I say that is it's not our permit. I know that you guys spend a lot of time on those applications, but at the end of the day, DES is gonna follow their guidelines and their criteria, and they're gonna approve or deny it based only on that. And then maybe what you say will influence them where there's a close call or something, or they'll put conditions in, which is really helpful for them, I think. But that's why we don't have the amount of time to spend, and those applications that you do get from the city are big. So we try to go through those in great detail, and I, like Kate, when I go through them, and Kate's doing a lot more of it now, obviously, but I would go through them, and then it wasn't until I hit the criteria on a lot of them that I would decide whether it was a winner or a loser. Sometimes it's obvious, like this is crazy, or
Yeah.
they don't want that much here, but when it's, you know, a big application and you're looking through all the stuff, sometimes it takes getting through the criteria before you really know how you're gonna recommend to the commission.
I was gonna say, on the DES ones, you can assume that DES at this point is not going out and looking at those sites. So if there's something, like if the fact that we do site visits, I think is really, really great, because we have done something that they haven't done, and there's things that might fit in there. So I mean, that's probably the most important thing at this point, is for us to go to the sites. But and then they will, I mean, there's some in the past that we have made comments on that they were like, oh, you know, okay, and they've pushed back because of that. So,
That's
and
good.
recently, so.
Hmm.
So it's not a lost cause, but it's definitely, you don't have to look at that whole thing, because that's the most ridiculous application.
But just give a little bit of local context and.
Yeah, local context and just whatever you pull out of it, but, and we were, yeah. We know the area, and other people don't, especially the water bodies for ducks and stuff
Can't
like
believe they
that.
don't, so they don't do site visits?
Right now, no,
They are pretty stretched.
they're stretched, and there's certain people that would do them and certain people that just don't do them. So.
On those bigger site applications, I would be curious to hear Kate and Peter's perspective, but the commissioners also, about how much we talk about renewable energy. Because I feel like I do try to bring that up, and since we have a climate action plan as a city, it feels relevant. And I know it's a little fuzzier because it's, you know, sort of, there's a couple steps on how it can impact the wetland, but like, I don't know, I'd just be curious to see what other people think about asking or talking to applicants about that piece.
It kind of brings up like kind of the bigger picture too, of just like, yeah, this is the ordinance. But that thing I feel like I've heard commissioners say over the years is just like stepping back, like we do have like a slightly bigger mandate as a conservation commission. And what is the way to kind of
Right,
honor
like,
that
in
part of the-
theory, if you're using reusables, you're cutting down on greenhouse gas and maybe helping with, you know, floodings or those kind of impacts, which could impact your property. Like, again, it's like sort of layered, but.
I feel like it's
know.
only like, if you're talking about it in our meeting, I feel like it can only be for like educational purposes. I don't know how we can like. I don't know, I don't talk about, because I don't have the knowledge, so that's only why I kind of leave it to you, because I'm like,
Is
you
it out of our
guys.
criteria?
I would, but I don't, because I feel I'm not. This is the wrong word. I'm not entitled to, in terms of, it's not in the criteria that.
That's
I-
the, I don't.
So I would definitely push for it. I mean, I'm like, why the hell isn't there solar panels on every new building in Portsmouth? But it's outside of this, so I don't,
Right.
and I don't feel comfortable doing it.
I think that's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate myself for those reasons.
Is there any way where we, like, in future changes in the ordinance to like somehow get that in?
I mean, you could consider things like if you put solar panels in, will let you have an impact. I don't know, like, I guess it's so focused on the wetlands. And it's the rules are all about wetlands. You'd have to change the rules to include renewable energy. And I think it would be more like, what would the renewable energy have an impact on conservation or open space?
Yeah,
Would be what you could, that's where you could get into the review that would be appropriate, but where it's just saying you should put solar panels on your house, cause it's a new house, why wouldn't you put solar panels on it? There's no teeth in your ordinance, unfortunately.
if we could.
I don't think it
try
hurts to say, you know, if you put solar panels on, there's gonna be less carbon created and these wetlands are gonna do better. I don't know, if you make some connection, that's probably not a good connection, but if you make a connection,
Well,
that's fine, but it's gonna be educational rather than.
be ready when you do that. For, as someone who runs in these circles, be ready for the person who is very versed on solar panels and start schooling you on, yeah, and what are the downsides of solar panels, right? Because it's not like put solar everywhere because, and I'm neither here nor there, just so you know, on it. But I watch it and I watch the expertise. It goes on in the page. It's one of the topics whenever it comes up, like the
Gets
solar
up.
panels in the historic district. You got all these people that are advocates and people are like, and I don't want to make it too personal, but they're like, you know, Josh Nitton's for it. And it turns into, and then you get these people that they're pretty well read and they make some pretty damn good points, right? About, well, but did you know these chemicals? Did you know this? Did you know this? And so it's like, I just like watching it, right? But I would be very concerned.
I just, for me, it feels a further step away, but it doesn't feel too far away from when we talk about lighting or some of those other
Lighting, I think,
pieces.
yeah.
So, but, right,
But
because
it's not even a
in-
stated impact. It should be probably put in.
right,
for
but we
everything,
still
you know,
ask
we asked
about
about it,
those kinds
yeah.
of things and snow removal, which again are a little, sort of more of a direct line of their impact on the wetlands and the ecosystem of the wetlands, but I feel like renewable energies and those kinds of things are maybe just one step,
Right.
further away, so there is clearly gonna be impact on that wetland, so that's.
Wondering about like sophisticated stormwater collection and management on site, like that, I could see an incentive to have an impact if you're, helping us handle a stormwater issue that we already have in town, I don't know how you would like give and take on that, but that's to me like that extra effort that, well, we do wanna have this impact, this development, but we're collecting and treating all our stormwater and not sending any of it into the system, like, okay, that, it's not exactly renewable, but it's like
No,
maybe
but
reuse or.
Well, and that
Yeah.
is something that you could talk about, like reducing the impact because they're doing that. Whereas if they're just running it off the pavement of the park. Into the
Right,
wetland.
yeah. That seems more applicable to what we are looking at already. There. And you can use that water for stuff. I don't know, but. Is there any direction in the ordinance to like have a like minimal requirement for large developments for using renewables or anything like that? Like, does the climate action plan have any?
Not in any of, and I don't know that we could from our state, the way our state works.
Yeah.
But that's something to think about. There could be incentives, there could be.
Just wondering, like, if there was, who would oversee that? Would it be a zoning or would that come to
I mean,
us?
there's allowances for it now in the historic district. But in terms of requirements.
Yeah.
The planning board, I suppose the zoning ordinance could specify it if the state had enabling legislation that said you can require solar panels or you can require renewable energy, but I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah.
It's all about incentives. There's some big discussions in mountain towns specifically because they have a limited amount of space. And they have the same types of problems as Portsmouth does because they're very tourism based. So they need staff in town, but it's a very desirable place. And some of them have come up with, okay, you can put an extra garage in, but you have to have an ADU that is going to be workforce housing on
Yeah.
top of that. And so there's definitely ways of doing it, but I don't think it falls in this. It's all about incentives, and we could find some incentives to put more solar, more wind, more battery, geothermal, whatever you like. But it has to be thought in the bigger picture and creatively in terms of, oh, you want to do that? Okay, you can do that, but you have to give us this.
It's helpful to hear you guys talk about it, right? Like just to kind of help us sort of stay in our lane. I think the other thing that I struggle with, and you're probably gonna have the same response to Nate. I guess I want to be also able to weigh like the social and sort of other benefits of a project more holistically too. Like I just feel very differently when I look at a project that it is clearly has like public benefits versus like benefits to just a single person.
Yeah,
And I mean, am I allowed to even?
yeah, I think that's important. I think the public benefit is important. It doesn't come out much, comes out a little bit in the utility one. But I think it's part of how, I think it comes into weigh on the decision you're making. But it doesn't clearly come out in the criteria, and we tried to add something about it when we revised these a while ago. But I don't think we ever really got there. But
I remember specifically the big red building where we were having a discussion about, oh yeah, this is public space.
yeah, where there's community
There's a
space.
fence in between the car park where people can park and that public space. You can't call that public space, at least not for me.
But they have
remember
parking
how-
spaces the public can use on that.
Yeah, and how does the public know, and how
Yeah.
much is that going to be like enforced or even accepted by the residents? The residents are gonna be like, why are you parking there? This is my property, or we live here, what are you doing there? It's all those things. It's like, yeah, it's marked as parking as public space here on the map, and it's in between the red building and the 100-foot buffer. But is anybody actually ever gonna benefit from that? I don't know. That remains.
It was the same as the property, the Christmas tree property. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
really eager to see when it's built. If those spaces are actually like that, like,
Yeah.
you know, if I wanna go over there and say, hey, here I am, I'm here to use this nice, cool park in the middle of this. I wanna see what that looks like.
No, I'm with you. It is part of it because we're protecting those spaces. Yes, it's a wetland buffer, it's a sponge, it's a storm protection, but it's also a biodiversity spot. And it's access to that piece of nature that kids don't have. We need to preserve those spaces and those opportunities for the people that live here.
I'm just willing to absorb a little more wetland impact when it's like a public pool versus a private pool. Or public tennis court versus a private tennis court, you know, like it's hard to let go of that.
I think that's fair.
I think that's okay.
I don't think that's inconsistent either,
Okay.
because like
That's fair.
we're
People are benefiting.
advocating for the city.
Okay,
I don't,
okay,
that's
helpful.
my opinion.
It's
I mean,
funny
you
how
are
we-
balancing impacts, so
Yeah,
the impact gets spread further, if more people can use it.
We keep
Yeah.
coming back to fairness and consistency, and the way I'm thinking about it is I have to be consistent with the criteria. But then the approach that I will, then the questions that I will ask or the requirements that I will put as a comment are going to be dictated more by fairness, and fairness can be based on means. Is it a personal or is it a professional, or what's the intent, what's the scale, and things like that. So consistency to me really is going to be to the criteria, and the fairness is going to be how do I balance that? Is it a large organization, or are they just trying to do something for their kids and they don't even understand how this works?
yeah. I guess I keep wishing that there was like one more criteria here that was like, is this consistent with Portsmouth's long-term vision for the city. Like it would sort of force me to go back to the master plan, and the master plan includes, you know, climate, and I don't know, like there's a little bit of like, this is a place where we want to foster this type of development. Okay, let's work with them. This is actually a place where we don't really want this type of development, and you know what I mean? Like,
I think if you can make it in a natural resource standpoint, like is
Yeah.
it overall degrading the city's natural resources in general?
mhm.
Maybe that would be a tie-in, but you kind of have to have some sort of link to the environmental impact of the wetlands that you're trying to protect.
And all the other land use boards, the master plan is their guiding document.
And it is for the zoning ordinance too.
Yeah.
It's why there's wetland regs, but there's still wetland regs.
Right.
Can I bring up one other thing that I struggle with? Unless there's someone else, invasive species.
That is such a.
Okay, so
Yeah.
both the red house that we keep talking about, are the red buildings on
Yeah.
Sagamore Creek there, and the one that just had the violation. Part of the problem was that they went in and they were like, oh, I see some invasive species. It says right here, I can clear invasive species, and they just cleared the entire buffer. And those invasive species were serving a purpose, you know, they were holding that ground intact.
Nobody does it correctly.
Um,
So they just take everything out.
and I don't know what, like, could we do like a little workshop-y or something on this issue and figure it out? I don't
You can
know.
remove it from the ordinance, that you can just do it
Yeah.
without a permit.
Or.
You have to change the ordinance.
Well, enforcing that they have to have somebody oversee
Yeah.
the removal and replacement or
I think
whatever.
that's one way to keep it in check.
So that, because I think DES does that. And it would be really, really helpful. And on our end too, being more specific, I mean, yeah, change the ordinance, can we change the ordinance to say you have to map out what you exactly you're gonna remove? Or
Yeah.
do we even want them?
Well, that's what I know.
Yeah.
Because I'll push back on that.
Yeah,
Invasive species, who decided they were invasive?
I know.
What dates did you decide they were invasive? When white man came, or when the indigenous were here, or 10,000 years before? What's invasive? And an environment isn't something that is static. It's something that always changes. It's moving, it becomes a wetland, then it grows, it becomes something else. Saying this is an invasive species, and me here, I decide that this needs to be removed. I have no
Yeah.
knowledge and no
That's slippery-
vision far
whether
enough
slippery slope.
forward or back to say this is invasive and this doesn't serve its purpose.
I mean,
To that point, I struggle with some of the more sophisticated applicants that use that as a measure to justify their impact, like.
Yeah.
That just, yeah, to your point, like, well, that's what's thriving now, our environment's changing, maybe those need to live here and
Ma-
what is
Maple trees-
native
maple
won't
trees are
survive.
moving-
Right.
Are they an invasive species because they're moving north? Because they're moving from their current habitat to a more northern habitat? Does that make them an invasive species? I don't know.
But then you look at Bittersweet, and Bittersweet is pulling down all the trees. So
I'm
you
just
don't
saying,
wanna
I don't
prohibit
know
somebody from
who
being
to
able to
say
do
that
that.
this is invasive
I
and it
don't
should be taken
disagree
out.
with you, it's.
I feel like one way we can handle
Actually,
that is just no longer allowing that as a concession. Like that's, if they want to do that, okay, like that's,
And here's like.
but not allowing.
Barbara's point, maybe it needs to be more thoughtful.
Yeah.
And more
Maybe
monitored. It's not just, we're gonna take out all the invasives. We're
Right.
gonna
Can't
take
It's like,
out
okay, great,
seeds.
now you can build in
Yeah.
the buffer because you removed Bittersweet, like
Right,
it's.
right.
It's more like, that's great that you're doing that, but like, that's not gonna count as the 16 trees that you
and
cut
it
down.
can't just be a shaded area on their plan being like, remove invasive species, like that is, there needs to be
Yeah,
way
you
You
more
can
than.
ask them, what invasive species are you talking about and where are they? Can you show
Mark them on the plan.
And, yeah,
You
and mark
could-
them on
you
the
could-
plan, because.
And what are you gonna leave? And what are you gonna leave
And what are you
behind?
gonna leave? And, yeah, because the follow-up is the biggest part too. I mean, it's
I
like,
think, you know,
Nails
not
it.
to defend the applicants, but I think when you look at how aggressive and how they completely cover a lot, these invasives, so it almost, you know, to think about sending a crew out there and pull like this invasive and leave that one little spindly thing that didn't thrive because it was covered and isn't gonna live anyway. And they come out and they do their thought is, we're gonna do a complete landscaping plan with all new plantings and it's gonna be beautiful. And in 10 years, it'll be overgrown with invasives like it was.
And that's where I wanna be like, just leave it alone, don't
But you
touch
can
it.
just say, leave it alone, or specifically, what's your plan, and we're gonna watch you do it. kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I mean,
Something
you
more
could
similar to
even
what you
add
did
a
in
seven
forestry.
as any removal of invasive species will not be accepted as a criteria for buffer impact or for remediating buffer impact.
I don't think it is anyway, like, it's not stated that it is.
No. I
No,
think
but it
that's just
often comes
people-
across
yeah.
as.
They
Yeah,
use
I don't
that.
like it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like a.
It's just
behind
like
the scenes.
stating
Allowed
that
to remove them
removal of
in the
invasives is not accepted as a remediating measure for any buffer impact.
Can't we just say that at a meeting too? Like if someone says that, we can just say, actually, this is maybe something you heard from someone that's come here before, but.
Well, personally, I think, again, to Barbara's point, there's a difference between bittersweet that's, tangling all of the trees, and Rosa rugosa, which is invasive, but lots of people have planted it along shorelines, and I don't know if that's the city who did it all along Junkins Ave, like right there near, so like there's.
Well, that might be Rosa Virginia.
So I thought that one was smaller and lower. I don't know them that well, but like there's that.
We go back.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Deeper, it's like, oh shit, it was the wetland, the Virginia rose and not the.
Yeah.
The Rosa rugosa that shouldn't.
Well,
be
when
there.
you have that dialogue, we can go that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
pictures and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've done that before. We've said, okay, don't take out the maple, the Norway maple. And we did that at Hunts Brook, and we said, but was there follow-up? I mean, it's like, there's no requirement to oversee that.
And we could have a I mean, I don't know if we could or not, but it'd be nice if we could have a positionality or whatever position statement that's like, these two invasives we think are worth managing for. The other invasives, typically, we don't think applicants are capable of doing
Or
a solid,
state invasive
yeah.
species list. So that's what
If
we,
there's a state list, then.
that's what we consider.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to give credit for it. You can allow it without being like a reason to approve a project or something. It's two different
Or it
things.
could just be like just general advice that we've endorsed as a group or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
Something a little softer, that's just like, here's some tips for good stewardship. But typically, I think what Fish and Game recommends is that in the shoreline area, you're actually supposed to leave the roots, like you just cut it at the
Supposed to.
ground surface and leave the roots, which is not actually eradicating invasive species.
I'm right back.
But because it's like so sensitive, right, to just rip up everything, you lose the soil integrity.
What happened on Belle Isle? Like in the end, like I remember us saying, oh, it'd be a really cool place to visit, because they had this really good company that was coming
Yeah.
in, working on.
They did cut and dab, didn't they, on all their stuff?
They
I don't think they pulled the roots on Belle Isle. They just did cut and dab.
they got rid of the invasives and they planted though. They did a bunch of planting.
Yeah,
Check it out. If we
Yeah,
can.
I haven't been out since.
'cause we get the yearly updates of the invasive
Monitoring
removal.
report. Yeah.
And I
do
think
come out.
they left the roots in the ground, but they did cut and dab just to kill everything and then planted natives in between.
Yeah, so that's like a helpful piece of information to.
Kind of see
See see how they succeed, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's an option.
Yeah, it's a tough battle.
Do we want to like assign next steps or like a next meeting or roles or things like that in the interest of 10 minutes left?
Yeah, I think just looking at the list that kind of we created already, we have a ton of other topics that we were hoping to get to. So, and I think we all knew this was going to be something that we really dove into. So I personally think it would be great to kind of have these types of meetings more regularly, even if it's once or twice a year. Or if we really set aside time during other business to kind of talk about this stuff on shorter agendas. But I think that's a great idea if other people are thinking similarly.
Yeah.
Because I think
Oh, go ahead.
I just think there's a couple other things that we wanted to touch on tonight, like attendance and kind of fairness in terms of voting, what our kind of time crunches are, if we want to start splitting meetings, also things like more application stuff, like what's our hard no, where do we deny automatically, There's a couple other things we wanted to talk about, like state permits, how we view after the fact permits. So I think the list keeps on growing the more we talk. So I think it would be really helpful to keep doing this.
So then there's some to-dos from tonight
Yeah.
on the, doing the
Action
work
list.
sessions and stuff like that, you know, promoting those.
Yeah, the website we can update with that, with more advice and kind of very obvious flow charts of, are you thinking of this? Talk to city staff. Are you
Yeah.
thinking of this? Apply for a full permit. Are you in the state buffer? Apply for a state permit and a state permit. Things like that we can definitely get started on in the short term.
And like making that checklist or doing something with the checklist. I don't know how to make it maybe easier for a lay person. I don't know what method we want to take with that, but
We could all look at that.
yeah.
Like, maybe, would that help if we looked at it and made suggestions or something? Or-
Yeah, I think that's great.
Like an annotated version or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
For example.
What do people think about like the idea of like 2 meetings like this year versus like meetings that maybe aren't mandatory but are like more regular and a lot shorter? I don't know.
For like questions that come up.
For this type of like discussion.
Once a quarter, I mean, seems too much. And
They might
there's a
even-
certain continuity in discussions.
And
And
start
you
over.
have a list of things that you wanted to go over. Maybe next time we plan for the next meeting to go through that list in a more structured way. So we can have one where it's more a discussion and one where it's more structured. And then the next one will be more of a discussion.
Sure.
That's good.
Did you want to talk about attendance really quick?
Yeah, I think, well, we have a few minutes. So I think most of you know, hopefully, that the way attendance goes is if you miss at least a third of the regular scheduled meetings, so if you miss at least 4 meetings unexcused, the city clerk, the chair, and the mayor are notified. And there is potential always for a member to be kicked off if they have that many unexcused absences. I don't think we've had that problem recently, but it's always just good to keep that in the back of your mind and to let the chair, myself, Peter know if you're unable to make a meeting. Excused absences are totally fine. If you got childcare issues, you know, doctor's appointments, work struggles, totally understand. We just want to make sure that at every meeting, especially the ones with the big agendas, we have as many members as possible to represent the board. I think recently we've dabbled a little bit in some attendance issues where half the meeting we have a bigger attendance, second half maybe we have less, or the whole meeting we have a smaller group than normal. And it can sometimes feel unfair to applicants who aren't getting every kind of perspective on their applications that they usually expect. So one thing we really wanted to try to get everyone's perspective on is attendance. And if our number at a meeting drops to like a certain point of like 5 or 4 members, do we then kind of stop the meeting and talk amongst ourselves in terms of, are we still being fair to the applicants that are in the room still? Do we postpone them to the next month? Do we start splitting meetings and having 2 a month for the bigger agendas, or for agendas where we know people can't really make it? That's kind of a lot of different areas of attendance to talk about, but I think the important one is just bringing it back to our conversation about fairness. Kind of where do we feel where we're being fair to applicants, and kind of when does that fall off when we lose people?
I was just gonna add to that, the losing people is where I'm concerned about, because if we know the meeting can only go till 6 because 3 people have to leave, that's one thing, but when we don't know people are gonna leave, and then we're left with 2 or 3 people at a work session, it looks really bad for the commission, but it also is, the applicant doesn't get the feedback they want. So maybe there's a way, you know, with the chairs, the co-chairs to say at the beginning of the meeting, is everybody gonna be able to make it till 6? You know, 6 is the time where you're supposed to vote to extend the meeting. And if everybody can make it till 6, then you know that, or you know someone has to leave at a certain time. But,
I wonder, like, can we know that, or like if people can?
Aren't we already
They can.
notifying you supposedly, like, with like?
this hasn't been consistent.
Okay, I thought that we were supposed to notify you like at least a week ahead of time I thought it was like 2 weeks if we weren't
I
gonna be
think
able.
Kate usually sends something out a week before.
Okay. I don't know.
But
why.
that's if you can attend or not. This is also like, how long can you?
Yeah,
Late or
Stay,
leaving
because
early
then-
or- yeah.
That kind of dictates how much is on the agenda and when to call applicants ahead of the meeting saying, we probably won't make it to you, and not waste their time.
We could
because I
split the
feel
meeting and have
horrible
2
about that.
meetings, or we could just postpone them till the next month, but,
Yeah.
but how long though? I feel like we probably should know that a week beforehand, how long we can stay, or is that not true?
Well, and
I
that's
think
what
the earlier the better, but I
Yeah.
think for the most part, we all
I
kind
have
of
no
expect
idea. I can't.
ourselves.
I don't know how to say.
Exactly. Good.
We all kind of have gotten comfortable like as 6:30 as our endpoint, and that's usually what we postpone till. But I think with the more applications we're getting in work sessions, I don't think we want to restrict all those applicants to like a timing so that we can make 6:30. I think it's better just to say, you know, you have the floor is yours. We can be out whenever. I think it's better just to either extend our time till 7:30 if we have to, or decide to postpone rather than giving applicants those time constraints.
and there's nothing wrong with that. If everybody's there, but everybody, or the vote is to not extend it, then it doesn't get extended, and then that's the end of the meeting and they get postponed to the next meeting, but
The
You're
majority,
gonna be
I'll
pissed.
just throw this out, because I thought about this with this very last agenda. Maybe this is wrong, or maybe it's right, but it's my assumption. My assumption is that there's an expected core number of time that the commission is gonna meet. In other words, I don't expect that the norm is gonna be that we're going to vote to extend for another 60 minutes. And I don't believe myself. In fact, if that were to become a norm, it would cause me to consider whether or not I wanted to be on the commission, quite frankly. There needs to be a set amount of time so that we can all plan that we're gonna get out of there at a certain time, because we all have obligations. So when it comes up at the last minute that, oh, well, we've got these people here and
That's what I feel horrible about.
and we're gonna have to stay for an extra hour. That's not and it's also not very good this is just obviously my opinion, I'm just expressing it. I also don't believe it's very helpful for the applicant. So I guess my ask would be, and I think we usually do a pretty good job, it's the unknowns. In my view, we should be planning the agenda on, this is how long approximately we think these items are gonna take, and it
Yeah.
usually should be fitting in the normal window. And the need to vote to extend to go longer should be very much an exception and not some sort of mechanism that we use to get more
That
through
really falls
the
most likely
process.
to
In that-
you
in that-
guys then, and trying to look.
well,
at the
that's fine, but the
agenda.
question then is, are you okay with 2 meetings a month? Because that's what it's gonna turn into, because if you don't wanna have a longer meeting, the applicants come in and they have to be reviewed,
that-
so.
No, because we can turn the other way around. We can give applicants a limited amount of time.
Well, you could, I'm not saying.
And then if they go over, they get pushed back to the end of the meeting or the next
They usually don't go
meeting.
over, usually it's the discussion that takes it over, which is good discussion, so I'm not
It's not the applicant.
trying to
Well-
limit it, but there's a lot of discussion that happens.
Don't we kind of know ahead of time though, like if it's gonna be a big agenda, couldn't this be like an email that was, and sometimes I think this happens, but like an email is sent out saying, hey, this looks like it might go over. Do we want to split meetings this month? What are people's availability for that? Or should we extend? And if I heard that 2 weeks out, just for myself, if I was notified 2 weeks before that I might need extra time, I'm totally comfortable saying, okay, like I'll go to 7 tonight, but like I have a 7 p.m. call that someone just called me
Yeah.
today. So it's like I do schedule myself very specifically, and like I'll never be able to stay later if it's not planned ahead of time.
I would agree with that. If you told me a week, even a week
Yeah.
ahead, that we're likely gonna have to run later. I don't mind that. It's just that in the moment, right, when you're like, oh, really? We're gonna, well, no.
But we
I-
can't
I-
really plan that way. We can't vote outside of a meeting. So there's a catch-22 there. If we're trying to
Don't we
decide.
do doodle polls though often for things like that?
No, I'm just saying a heads up that
If we
we,
said we're gonna, it's a big agenda and can, then we'll know if people can go late. We could do that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect, yeah.
That's all. I think that's a good way to do it. It's just, we can tell by how many of us have to leave during those. It's multiple ones of us. I know I have. And so you can tell that that's problematic, that last minute, it's gonna run an hour later because somebody has kids to pick up, it's not like we're going, oh, well, we need to get to the bar, right? It's,
No, there's no one saying that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not disagreeing with anything that's said and seeing that it's 7:01 and we need to be done. But I would just be curious or have commissioners think about, our agendas are not getting any shorter, right? Like lately, we are either trying to jam in other business or other things to end at 6:05 or 6:10 so would this commission want to consider, do we just plan that our meeting is gonna be now from 4 to 7? Or that we're gonna have a second set possible I'm not sure, like, I have kids, I have a busy life, I'm not sure what I could manage, or we're just gonna plan, if we can get the agenda completed in our second Wednesday in the 2 hours, that's great, but if not, then we all need to be ready and know that we might have to come back the following Wednesday or whatever. Like, I think that might be something we need to seriously consider because agendas don't look like they're shrinking anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's hard to say to someone, well, the agenda filled up, you're gonna have to come next month,
Right.
because then you're not gonna.
if the HDC does that,
It's the same
they're
thing.
like, oh, it's 2
They
days.
split it into two if they have.
Hey, could you do,
In 1 month.
Come back, yeah.
could you do a doodle poll for us so that we could maybe?
Yeah, I think if
Which of those?
we start thinking about that every month, if we get all the applications are submitted, are due 2 weeks prior to the meeting date, a week and a half before the meeting, we can send out, saying either can everyone stay till 7 PM or is everybody available on the third Wednesday of the month for a second meeting? And if that can be turned around pretty quickly, then we can make that decision of we split it or we stay late.
It just be
Yeah.
also just a poll, just in the generic, like which would you prefer and which are you capable of doing? Or does it vary from week to week? Like, yes, no, or variable?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Right now.
great point.
Yeah, exactly. We can do it right now.
Or we could do it now.
What do people think? Is it
Yeah.
7 o'clock regularly?
Seven.
2 meetings a month? What's your
No.
preference?
The other option is the third Wednesday of every month, same time, 4 to 6. That's what we have it
No, to
reserved
what?
for.
I
No,
don't
the
want
2
another
meetings?
meeting. I'd rather have
I
a
would
longer
like
one.
another
But yeah, 7?
PM.
Yeah, how many for 7? At the drop down.
We'll go with
If
whatever.
necessary,
everybody
not
else.
like. as
Yeah.
a-
Yeah,
Fair.
yeah.
As
I would
opposed to-
prefer our current meeting
leave it
extend
open.
I'll
longer
tell people.
than
As opposed to a second
third
meeting
Wednesday.
Yeah.
each
Well,
month.
I'll throw this out, and it may or may not be me. If we were gonna do 3 hours, I don't have any challenge with that. It would be more ideal for me individually if it was 3 to 6, not 4 to 7.
Oh, we just switched it.
It used to be 3:30.
We had a hard time getting members.
Yeah.
3:30 was hard.
But I know that's hard for other people to be there at 3, so.
Yeah, we just couldn't get new members very easily.
4 o'clock start, sure.
What?
I like the 4 o'clock start. Yeah, 4 to 7. I would like that to just be like, this is the thing you have to be ready for, Lynn. Like,
I think it would just,
it's not easy for me.
for me, 3 hours of doing anything, my brain like shuts down. And I wanna be able to do my best on it, but like, I guess, I don't know.
It's
We
really
could- we
just
could do- we could
making
do a
yourself
trial, like-
available, though. It's
Yeah.
not saying the meetings are all gonna be 3 hours long.
Totally,
It's just
yeah.
saying,
But I think a lot of them might be is kind of what we're
yeah,
looking at.
that's what happens.
So I,
But I think it's better to know than to have people leave early and like leave the rest of the board to deal with what's left.
totally.
So to me, it feels almost better to call the meeting and say, okay, we're gonna come back in a month or a week. It won't be next week unless we plan it. So if we don't make it through the agenda, then we have to postpone to the next month.
I don't know.
But like,
I kind of think that's
I
not
think
that
we
big a
waited
deal.
for a building permit for like 6 months at one point with the city of Portsmouth. Like, people have to wait when things get super busy around here, and I think.
It's not,
Yeah,
No,
but if you
it's-
keep postponing the next month's gonna be so.
Yeah, but if the ones that are postponed are at the front of the next month, like, their likelihood that they get heard is higher. Obviously, if they're number one,
The agenda.
yeah. We have the old business, and old business always goes first.
Yeah.
Work sessions, I think, in my opinion, should be at the end, but.
Yeah, but I feel like they should have the full complement of the board.
Yeah, still have the full, yeah, I agree. Not at the end because we don't care how many members are there, but at the end because they're not a priority to the people that
Right.
have applications in.
I think if I was like,
decide? No.
Let's go.
7?
I think so.
Maybe a doodle poll so people can think about it.
yeah.
7,
Ugh.
or
I think if
not.
I was an applicant, I would not
Six.
want like 6:45.
There's still gonna be an email by Kate.
Stuff.
Yeah, the general consensus is keep your calendars open until 7 PM. But if we can't make it and if they can't,
Yeah,
we'll have to change it.
like 4 to 6:30
Yeah.
is the like.
Yeah, maybe 4 to
And it's like
6:30.
only in special circumstances do we go past
Yes,
this.
I mean,
So
six
I don't
is
know.
probably
I
a
think,
better.
Yeah.
the other thing is to try to move through them fast.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, maybe we can now that we have like a little more clarity and.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've
Yeah.
made my decision, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, that's enough
Like,
talking.
is everyone ready for vote?
Yeah.
And then I see some more hands, which is great, but I'm like,
Yeah, guilty, yeah, guilty.
which is great, but it, you know, again, that probably just adds to the.
Bye, Kate.
With what?
All right, thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so much, Kate.
Appreciate it.
I have to stop.
Bye, Kate.
See you soon. Yeah, you just have to end the webinar.
Just end the webinar.
I saw I didn't see it until
Right,
like
see you
3
later.
days later. I didn't